The cleaner made her own dress to get the CEO's attention, and left everyone speechless. The office building of Vogue Line International buzzed with celebration that Friday night. Glittering lights hung from the ceiling, champagne glasses clinked together, and the fashion elite of New York City filled the room in their dazzling gowns and sharp tuxedos. In the far corner, Mara Johnson stood still for a moment, clutching the strap of her handbag. Just hours before, she had been pushing her cleaning cart down these same marble halls, unnoticed, invisible, blending into the background like the furniture she polished every night. But tonight was different. She had spent weeks stitching together a dress from scraps of fabric left behind in the company's workshop. The result was breathtaking, a flowing gown of bold colors, draped in a way no one had seen before. It was a piece of art. A dress that spoke. A dress that screamed, "Look at me." She exhaled shakily as she stepped into the center of the hall. Conversations dipped for just a second. Heads turned. Someone whispered, "Who is she?" Another said, "That dress, it looks like something straight off the runway." At the front of the room, Ethan Cole, the powerful CEO of Vogue Line, was mid-conversation with a group of investors. His sharp suit was perfectly tailored, his golden cufflinks catching the light. He was the kind of man whose presence demanded attention. Everyone wanted a moment with him. Everyone, except he had never once noticed Mara. But when his eyes lifted and caught sight of her across the room, his words faltered. The investors glanced at him, confused. Ethan's gaze locked on Mara, scanning the dress with the precision of a man who had built an empire from fabric and design. "Who is she?" he muttered under his breath. Mara's heart raced as he started moving toward her. Every step he took echoed louder than the music in her ears. She remembered the countless nights she had cleaned his office, hearing him on calls, never once glancing her way. Now he was looking straight at her. When Ethan finally stopped in front of her, his voice was low, curious. "I don't think we've met," he said. His eyes narrowed slightly as though trying to place her face. "That dress, it's extraordinary. Which designer made it?" Mara's throat went dry. She had rehearsed this moment over and over in her head, but now that it was here, her voice almost failed her. "I did," she whispered. Then, with more strength, she added, "I made it myself." Ethan blinked, surprised. "You made this?" He looked at her as though he were seeing her for the first time. "Yes," Mara replied, straightening her shoulders. "From scraps. After my shift." The room seemed to fall quieter around them. For the first time, Mara wasn't just the cleaner. She was a woman standing tall in her own creation, demanding to be seen. And Ethan Cole, the man who never noticed, was finally noticing. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A few women in glittering gowns leaned closer to whisper, their eyes narrowing with a mix of curiosity and jealousy. One of the senior designers, Claudia Renner, who was known for her sharp tongue, smirked and muttered just loud enough for people around her to hear. "Scraps? That's impossible. No cleaner stitches like that." Mara caught the words, but instead of shrinking, she lifted her chin. Her pulse thundered, but her eyes stayed steady on Ethan. Ethan, however, didn't seem to hear anyone else. His gaze roamed over the fabric, the drape, the bold mix of textures. He lifted his glass absent-mindedly but forgot to drink, his mind clearly calculating, measuring, dissecting every seam. Finally, he looked at Mara again. "You've never presented designs to our team. Why?" His voice was calm, but there was a sharpness underneath it, as if he couldn't believe talent this raw had been hiding under his roof. Mara's fingers tightened around her clutch. "Because no one ever looked at me long enough to ask what I could do. To most people here, I'm just the woman who empties the trash bins." A hush settled. Her words hung heavy in the air, more cutting than any insult Claudia could have thrown. A waiter passing by slowed, his tray wobbling slightly, eyes darting between them as if even he sensed the weight of this moment. Ethan's jaw tightened. For the first time in his life, perhaps, he looked guilty. He cleared his throat. "And yet here you are, standing in the middle of my company's gala wearing the most original piece in this room." Claudia scoffed from the side, rolling her eyes. "It's a fluke. Luck. Probably stolen patterns." Mara turned to face her, her voice trembling but fierce. "Luck doesn't stitch fabric. And nothing about this dress is stolen. It's mine. Every thread." The guests murmured louder now, some nodding in agreement, others exchanging doubtful glances. Phones began to discreetly lift, flashes capturing the woman who had stepped out of the shadows. Ethan studied her again, his tone softer now. "What's your name?" Her heart hammered. She thought of all the nights she had whispered her dreams to herself while sweeping empty hallways. This was the first time anyone important had asked. "Mara Johnson." Ethan repeated it slowly, almost like he was memorizing it. "Mara." The music shifted into a slower rhythm, violins filling the hall. For a moment, it felt like the entire gala revolved around just the two of them, the CEO and the cleaner who had turned herself into the most unforgettable woman in the room. Claudia stepped forward now, her heels clicking sharply against the marble. She wore a smirk that was sharper than any blade. "Mr. Cole," she said sweetly, though venom dripped from her tone, "you can't be serious. This woman cleans our floors. She has no business in this room, let alone claiming to be a designer. If we start entertaining fairy tales, what happens to the years of training, the degrees, the experience we, real designers, put into this industry?" A few people chuckled nervously, siding with Claudia. Others frowned, clearly uncomfortable with the cruelty. Mara's chest rose and fell as though the air itself had thickened. The old Mara, the one who kept her head down, who smiled politely even when ignored, wanted to shrink away. But the woman in this dress, the woman who had poured her soul into every stitch, couldn't stay silent. She stepped forward, her voice steady. "I may not have a degree, Claudia. I may not have connections. But I know fabric. I know how to make something out of nothing. I know how to create beauty where no one expects to find it. And isn't that what fashion is supposed to be?" The room went silent. Every pair of eyes swung back to Ethan. His face was unreadable, caught between admiration and something else. Claudia scoffed again, her cheeks burning. "Please. Don't let her embarrass your brand, Ethan. She's not one of us." That's when Ethan finally spoke, his voice cutting through the tension like glass breaking. "Claudia," he said firmly, "be quiet." Gasps echoed across the hall. Claudia's lips parted in shock, but Ethan had already turned back to Mara. His gaze softened, and for the first time, the man who ruled a fashion empire looked less like a CEO and more like a man trying to piece together the truth standing in front of him. He leaned in slightly, his voice low so only she could hear. "You've been here this whole time. Right under my nose. And I never saw you." Mara swallowed hard, her eyes stinging. "That's because you never looked." For a long moment, they just stared at each other, Mara's pride and pain raw in her eyes, Ethan's curiosity and guilt heavy in his. Around them, the gala buzzed again, whispers spreading like wildfire. "The cleaner? Mara Johnson." "Ethan's interested in her." Then Ethan straightened, his jaw firming as though he had made a decision. "Walk with me," he said quietly. Her breath caught. She didn't know where this would lead, but as she placed her hand against her dress and nodded, one thing was certain, this was no longer just a party. This was the beginning of something that could change her life forever. Ethan guided Mara toward the edge of the hall, past clusters of curious guests whose whispers followed them like shadows. The tall glass doors opened to a quiet balcony overlooking the glittering city skyline. The hum of the party dulled behind them, replaced by the soft rhythm of traffic far below and the night wind brushing against their faces. For the first time since stepping into the room, Mara could breathe. She placed her hands on the balcony railing, the city lights flickering in her eyes. Ethan stood a step behind her, watching in silence. His usual confidence, the sharp edge that made him untouchable, was gone. In its place was something far more human. Finally, he spoke. "Why didn't anyone tell me about you?" His voice carried frustration, but it wasn't aimed at her. It was aimed inward, at himself, at his world that had been blind. Mara gave a small, almost bitter laugh. "Because no one ever thought I mattered enough. I was just invisible." She turned, her dress swaying as she faced him. "Until tonight." Ethan's eyes softened. "Invisible? Not anymore." The words struck something deep in her, but she shook her head. "I didn't come here to beg for your attention. I came to prove to myself that I could be seen. Even if only for one night." Her honesty hit him harder than any rehearsed pitch ever could. He studied her, taking in not just the dress but the fire in her eyes, the strength in her voice. "You're not like anyone in that room," he said quietly. "And that scares them," Mara replied. A silence stretched between them, heavy with meaning. The wind tugged at a strand of her hair, and without thinking, Ethan reached out and tucked it gently behind her ear. His hand lingered for a moment before he pulled it back, as though realizing the intimacy of the gesture. "Mara Johnson," he murmured, almost to himself. "You might be the most important person I've met in years." Her heart skipped, but she masked it with a steady breath. "Or maybe I'm just another story for you to tell at the next board meeting." His brow furrowed, the first flicker of hurt in his eyes. "Is that what you think of me?" "I think," she said softly, "that men like you only see what they want to see. And tonight, for once, I made you look." Ethan's lips parted, but he said nothing. The city roared beneath them, the night heavy with the weight of a moment neither of them had expected. Inside, the party music swelled again, but out here, it was just them, two people from different worlds standing at the edge of something neither could yet define. Ethan stepped back slightly, running a hand through his dark hair. He looked at her dress one last time, then back at her eyes. "You've got talent, Mara. Real talent. Not the kind we can teach in workshops or schools. The kind you're either born with, or fight to survive with. Mara raised an eyebrow, wary. And you think I'll survive in your world? He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. That's the question, isn't it? This isn't a world that makes room for people like you. People without connections. Without a name on the door. But maybe we can change that. If you're willing to take the risk. She felt a mix of hope and fear churn inside her. Take the risk? And what if I fail? You won't fail, he said firmly, stepping closer. Not because I'll protect you, but because you've already proven something tonight. You made the impossible happen. You made me see you. That's more than most people in this industry can claim in a lifetime. Mara's throat tightened. She wanted to believe him, but the words carried a weight she wasn't sure she could bear. So, what? You just want me to join your company? To design under your name? Ethan shook his head. No. I don't want you to be anyone but yourself. If you want to work here, you do it your way. Your ideas, your designs. No one will touch them without your say. But, you'll need to prove it. One dress isn't enough. One moment doesn't erase the years of being invisible. She stared at him, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. The risk was enormous. The opportunity terrifying. But for the first time, she felt the thrill of possibility. And if I say yes? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Then we start, Ethan said, his tone almost reverent, as if he were acknowledging the gravity of the moment. We start building something no one will expect. Together. Mara took a deep breath, letting the wind wash over her, feeling the pulse of the city in her chest. For the first time, she imagined a world where she didn't just clean floors, where she belonged in the spotlight she had only dreamed of. She nodded slowly. All right, I'll do it. Ethan's expression softened, but he didn't smile. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small card. Meet me here tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. Bring ideas, bring sketches, bring everything you've ever imagined. Mara took the card, feeling its weight in her hand like the promise of something life-changing. I will. He studied her for a moment, then stepped back. Good. And Mara, one more thing. She looked up, curious. Don't let anyone ever make you feel invisible again. With that, he turned and walked back toward the gala, leaving Mara on the balcony, heart racing, mind spinning, and for the first time in years, truly seen. The next morning, Mara arrived at Vogue Line International with her sketchbook clutched tightly to her chest. The lobby looked the same, gleaming marble floors, polished brass fixtures, but to her, it felt different now. It wasn't just a building. It was a battlefield she had just stepped onto. As she rode the elevator up, her nerves churned. Every floor felt heavier than the last, as though the building itself were testing her courage. When the doors opened to the design floor, Mara froze. Rows of designers, assistants, and interns were already at their stations, sketching, draping fabrics, discussing silhouettes. And in the center, commanding attention even in a simple black suit, stood Ethan Cole. He spotted her immediately, his eyes lighting up, not with casual recognition, but with the same awe she had seen on the balcony last night. Mara, he called, his voice carrying across the floor. Good morning. Ready to start? She swallowed and nodded. Yes, sir. The room went quiet for a second. Some of the designers glanced at each other, whispering. Mara could feel their judgmental eyes on her, some curious, some skeptical, and others openly hostile. Among them, Claudia Renner's glare burned like acid. You're really letting her in here? Claudia hissed under her breath to a colleague. Ethan's voice rang out, calm but icy. Yes. She earned her place. Focus on your work, Claudia. Mara felt her cheeks heat, but she lifted her chin. She had expected opposition. She had prepared for doubt. What she hadn't expected was the surge of pride at Ethan's defense. He walked over to her desk, a simple corner with a view of the city skyline, and placed a hand gently on her sketchbook. Show me what you've got, he said. I want to see your vision. Don't hold back. Mara opened the sketchbook. Pages of designs poured out, fabrics cut in bold shapes, dresses that flowed like water, unconventional patterns paired with elegance. She explained each one, her voice gaining strength as she spoke about the choices she made, the stories she wanted each piece to tell. A few of the senior designers whispered to each other, impressed despite themselves. Ethan leaned back, studying her sketches. These aren't just ideas, he said. These are statements. You're not just designing clothes, you're telling a story. And I want the world to hear it. Mara's heart raced. This was more than a job offer. This was trust, validation, and the chance to prove herself in a world that had always ignored her. Then Claudia stepped forward, smirking, her tone dripping with condescension. Don't get ahead of yourself, Mara. Fashion isn't about just bold ideas, it's about precision, technique, experience. Can you even handle the pressure? Mara met her gaze, unflinching. I don't need your approval, Claudia. I only need to prove it with my work. Ethan watched silently, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Exactly, he said. We'll let the work speak. As the day began, fabrics rustled, sewing machines whirred, and sketches were pinned to boards. Mara felt a thrill. This was the first time she wasn't just surviving. She was creating. And for the first time, the world had to see her. Weeks passed, and Mara's designs began turning heads. Each new piece she created carried her bold, original vision, blending elegance with daring creativity. The same designers who had whispered behind her back now glanced at her with grudging respect, and even Claudia Renner found herself silently admiring a design she hadn't thought possible from someone untrained. Then came the night of Vogeline's biggest runway showcase of the year, an event watched by critics, celebrities, and industry leaders worldwide. Mara's collection was featured front and center, her signature daring cuts and vibrant fabrics illuminated under the spotlight. Backstage, her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the last model's gown. Ethan appeared at her side, his usual confident aura softened with pride. You did this, he said quietly. All of it. Every stitch, every idea, it's yours. Mara smiled, her chest tight with emotion. I couldn't have done it without someone finally seeing me. The lights dimmed. Music swelled. Models stepped onto the runway, one after another, each creation a story of Mara's journey from invisible cleaner to visionary designer. The crowd erupted in applause with every step. Cameras flashed. Social media lit up in a frenzy, praising her innovation, her courage, and her unmistakable style. Backstage, Ethan handed her a glass of champagne. You've changed everything here. Not just the designs, but how we see talent. And maybe, how you see yourself. Mara took a slow sip, letting the warmth spread through her. She thought of the nights she had cleaned offices, invisible and unnoticed. Now, she stood in a world that once ignored her, shining under lights she had only dreamed of. And this is just the beginning, she said, her voice steady, radiant with confidence. Ethan nodded, eyes meeting hers. The beginning of a legacy no one will forget. For the first time in her life, Mara felt completely seen, not for a role she played, not for the work she cleaned up, but for who she truly was, bold, brilliant, and unstoppable. And in that moment, she knew she had claimed her place in the world, on her own terms.